So yes, this is Simran Whittam, game producer at TryHard Interactive and co-founder of Manchester Gamers Unite, interviewing Tim Keenan of Ginger Biscuit Games. Hello Tim, thanks for joining us.
Hello.
So Tim, we're just going to get straight into the questions, if that's good with you.
Yeah, it's fine.
So Tim, tell us a bit more about the man behind Ginger Biscuit Games, and tell us about the game you've been working on and off again, I believe it is.
Off and on again, yeah. Although people keep getting that the wrong way around. Okay, so a bit about myself. I've been in and around the games industry, not actually working in AAA or anything like that, just making games with groups around the industry for going back over 10 years, about 11 years or so. Originally came out of uni, graduated with a software engineering degree from Aberystwyth. Came out looking to get into AAA when AAA was the way that people did when they came out of uni. You applied to all the big companies you could find and went through the grueling rejection process of letters or not letters and occasionally interviews. And then sold my soul and went working in the defence industry instead because there was more money and work to be done there. So spent a lot of time working in other jobs that weren't related to games, and then carried on making games outside of that. Eventually got involved in London Indies whilst working down south. Ran up set up nights and things there for people, got to know a lot of people there, got involved in a few projects, and then started making off and on again just before I moved back to Warrington. So I had, I think actually, how long have I been here now? Just after I moved back to Warrington, I apologise. And started getting involved with groups with people like Simon Smith, Simon Jackson, Keith Andrews, people like that. Got to know a lot of people up here, took the game out, showed it in play testers, got the feeling I was onto something that people enjoyed. So greenlit it, got good reaction from that, and then I've decided to plough ahead with it as much as I can. It's hard work. Partly because I have a day job that isn't games, and because I have children, and lots of other things around actually doing game dev. So I do game dev in whatever hours I can find, mostly kind of the small hours, and I have been making off and on again now in my spare time around family and day job for about 2 years. The aim is to finish it later this year. December, because I have a new baby coming, so that's my deadline. And then ship PC early next year and Xbox middle of next year is the plan. So there we go. That's a nice summarised.
Busy schedule, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come, if you don't mind me pushing about that? So obviously you were kind of like, you'd never really been on the scene. How did you come into contact with people like Simon Smith and stuff like that? How did that come about?
Well, I mean, I've been around the scene for a long time. Bear in mind, I had a discussion with someone this year. I was down at Develop, and I pointed out that the first Develop I went to was in 2007, back when I was looking for work in AAA studios. And I met people through that I kept in good contact with. And then really sort of when mobile was taking off, I was making tech demos rather than games. I was making stuff to get myself interviews. And someone basically said to me, well, there's no excuse for you not making your own games, which was a fair point. So I started making some small mobile games, and that got me going to pub nights again. Got involved with a lot of people. As I say, got inspired by some of the projects that people were doing by themselves or in small teams. I met a lot of people in London doing that. And then when I moved back to Manchester, it was actually Keith Andrews, who I'd been in touch with on Twitter, suggested I come to one of the pub nights in Manchester, and I met Simon through him, and then met plenty more people around that. As you know, Simon is kind of the go-to guy in Manchester for events and knowledge. He seems to know everything that's going on. So I met a lot of people through him and got involved as best I could in Manchester, and still trying to keep involved as much as I can.
Yeah, you definitely seem quite big in the scene. I mean, you're at the Unreal Dev meetups, and you're at pretty much every event, and you've had Comic-Con recently, but that's a big step.
Yeah, that was good fun. Really good fun, that. It was very good of the people behind the MCM to invite local devs and give us space for free. We had some great games on show, so it was a really good weekend.
Yeah, sounds really quick look. Hopefully our team will be able to get a spot there one day, join there next
Yeah.
year.
Well, this is the thing. They seemed really happy with. It was new for them to have games on in Manchester, and the guy organising it was really pleased with what we managed to do. He couldn't speak highly enough of the games section after the event. Even to the point where we got another game dev team in, Odd Bug, who of course comes to the MGU, MCM and MGU mix it up. It's the MGU in September. It was like the night before we had spare space. And he was like, well, do you reckon you can get someone else? We were like, yeah, straight on Twitter, straight to anyone we could think of. And they had just announced the Lost Bear at the time. So I think they had announced it like 3 days before. And it was like, if you can get here tomorrow morning, set up, brilliant. And they got the space. So, yeah, MCM, hopefully next year, will want more.
Just saying.
Yeah. I will happily share contacts.
So another little quick question for you. So can you tell us about your journey into the games industry and how you got started? You came from University of Wales, correct? As you said, studying software engineering. How did that lead to going into the video games industry?
Well, in fairness, I mean, take a step before that. I actually went to Aberystwyth to study mathematics, which was a mistake. I love maths. I am very much a geeky programmer mathematician, but I did not enjoy the course at all. Partly just down to the fact there was about 12 people on the course and not very, very talkative. It's not the way you want to spend your time at uni. So I was living with a computer scientist at the time, and he convinced me after my first year to go and speak to the head of their department. So I went, spoke, took a big risk, dropped a year back, and started scratch on a 4-year course instead of the 3-year course I was originally on. I did software engineering. It was the first time I'd done proper structured programming. Before that, I'd done bits on my own, going back to like bits when I was really young on the Amstrad and stuff, but I'd never done anything proper. I knew nothing about actually creating software and making a good project. So that got me into software development. It didn't get me into games. I had a love of games. I mean, that kind of is a passion through most of the people you'll meet in our industry. Going back to, as I say, the Dragon when I first started out in the 80s, which was my first computer, Amstrad, Atari, Amiga, and so on, along with Nintendo and Sega consoles along the way. So I had a love of games. And when I finally started programming, it was a case of, well, that's what I want to do. I want to make these. I want to make projects on the side, and on the side of the database stuff and rubbish projects we were doing during the course time, I was making small projects, tech demos and games on the side. As it was, as I tried to make a way into the games industry coming out of there, the traditional route, applying to many companies. I had some good interviews, and unfortunately didn't get the jobs. And paying the bills matters, so I went and worked in other industries and learned more about software development there. Games is always something, especially now, that you can get into quite easily in terms of making a project, not easily in terms of making money or getting into the industry and getting into a business. But in terms of if you want to make something you're passionate about, the tools are there, the help is there. There's plenty of communities around in order to get involved. So it's not hard to be involved as long as you want to be. You just need to be able to get yourself out there and make something.
Sounds like it's been quite the journey then so far. Quite the mixed bag.
It's been interesting. I mean, it's mixed with other things that have gone on in my life, and it's always been something that's run alongside whatever I've been doing. I've always had projects on the go, some of which I've completed, and some of which, like any person making games or software, some of which have fallen by the wayside and are gathering dust in a folder on my PC somewhere. But off and on again, on the other hand, has taken on a bit of a life of its own. And there's a lot of people who have helped me and pushed me forward with it. So it's a game that will have to be completed. It's reached a point now where it's a good game. It just needs finishing, which is the hardest part, but I've got enough people pushing me to get it done. So it will be done. It will be done by December, I promise, in one form or the other. So
Yeah, people seem really, really fond of it. Whenever it's been at MGU, it's become a massive hit. I say it's become quite the regular, hasn't it? So,
it
assuming that
has. I enjoyed
people
playing it.
enjoy
So.
it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's a great night to have. I mean, the multiplayer is basically what I'm showing at MGU. The single player would take forever for someone to play through, but the multiplayer goes down well at a night like that, and I've enjoyed bringing it because the amount of feedback I get. And as a solo dev, I can't test four-player multiplayer. I can't test it, so the amount of feedback I get from taking it to an event like that is huge.
That's what the benefit of it is, really, for people like
Yeah,
you, to just get audio and visual feedback from it. So obviously, you get the
yeah,
people coming up to you, telling what you want, and just seeing how they play alone is fantastic. I mean, we got it ourselves the very night when we did it first time at MGU. It's
yeah.
invaluable.
It's huge. You can't pay for that sort of feedback. You can't. It's something that you take to an event like that, and it's worth its weight in gold. It can bring your game on huge in one night, and it gives you inspiration to do more. So I come away from something like a pub night or like the MGU, and I instantly want to go home and code. Now it's ridiculously late by the time I get back, and there may have been pints involved. So perhaps it's not the time to be coding, but that's the time where more stuff gets done because I'm on a high from going back and seeing what people liked and what people want different, which bits I've watched people do and gone, nah, it's not right. So yeah, having that sort of community driven almost is invaluable.
So we'll move on to the next question. That's great to hear because that's what MGU's goals are really about. You know, helping game devs get feedback. So, next question is: so could you go into a bit of detail about your software engineering jobs and projects that have led to you developing a video game and being where you are in the industry today?
My day jobs do lend themselves sometimes to games, but not massively. I've got a lot of skills, and I think I've got a lot from a development background from my day jobs. As I say, I've worked in defence, finance, tiny bit of space work, insurance work, and now work in ERP software. None of which you would traditionally link to games. Although some people kind of go, does defence link? No, it really doesn't. It's a completely different industry. In saying that, the processes in terms of creating software and data structures, algorithms, and just the discipline involved in actually running a project and completing the project does cross over nicely. It's stuff that's helped me be a good software engineer. So I hope I approach my games that way. They're not as hacky as they once were when I came out of uni. I do follow processes much better than I did back then, partly because of those jobs. The main thing they do, however, if I'm completely honest, is pay the bills. Some people say, they look at the jobs I've done and some are exciting and some are boring. And at the end of the day, they're all software development. They pay the bills, which is hard to do as an indie developer. And they don't drain me from making games during the 9 to 5. So when I want to make games after that, I'm not burnt out. It's nice to have variety. So yeah, I'm fairly well experienced, both in QA, development, support, customer facing stuff, and I think all this kind of does help. But it's how you then apply it within the industry.
So how would you say you've applied it to your point within the industry?
Well, I think I'm massively introverted in general, I have to say, or certainly that's my natural state. However, you've seen me at good nights. I'm fine. I get on with people and I get about quite well. And part of that is down to the fact that I've been trained in industries where you have to go out and you have to speak to people. You have to go in front of customers. You have to talk about requirements. You have to get on with people. You have to socialize with those people. And I've been put in positions professionally that I may have found uncomfortable from a default position. But that was my job. I had to do it. I had to learn it. I had to get on with it. And that stuff carries through into life. And that helps you be an experienced person to go out there and put yourself out there anyway, and be able to talk sense about how to create software. So it gives you confidence, if nothing else.
Fair enough. So we'll move on to the next question. bit of a mouthful, this one.
Okay.
Can you go into detail about the game you're making at the moment, On and Off Again? How has your experience with its development been for you? I know you show it off as at many networking and gaming events as much as possible, such as like we said, Manchester Comic Con, MGU, Indie Drinks. How has the whole process been for you?
It started off as a bit of fun. If I'm honest, it was one of those projects that was gathering dust a little bit. It looked completely different when I first started it. It was a demo involving a little stick man and lines drawn on a piece of paper. And that line drawing effect has carried on through to Off and On Again. It's actually become sort of the main mechanic of the game in terms of drawing parts of the game out and drawing them back in again, depending on the switching off and on, as it were. So it started off, as I say, as a bit of fun. It actually started on a couple of days of develop in a pub in between other events that were happening, in between drinks and in between networking and in between talks. I sat in a pub and I put a couple of hours into this game. And then it sat gathering dust in a folder on my PC for probably about 2 years, whilst I was working on a completely different game that never went anywhere. And then I pulled this back out again and dusted it off, looked at it, had an idea where I wanted to take it story-wise, and cracked on with making the 2D platform element of it. Now, it's been interesting in that I put a lot of effort into the 2D platformer for about a year, and it was only one weekend I decided to add multiplayer, and then multiplayer has really sort of taken the game off, and a lot of the stuff that's gone into the single player has then come out of the multiplayer mode. So a journey of discovery in that sense. And it has, again, it comes down to the fact of regular play. It comes down to taking it to playtest sessions. I was taking the single player and it was getting good feedback, and it got greenlit purely off the single player. There was no multiplayer element then. However, doing regular updates, taking it to playtesters, taking what was a side bit of it with a multiplayer mode and going, what do people think of this? The huge feedback I got from that is what's then pushed that side forward. If I hadn't been taking that to events, had I been doing it on my own, I might have made that on a weekend and go, yeah, I'm not that fussed about that, and then carried on with a single player. And it would be a very different game if I had. So yeah, again, we go back to the community-driven side of it, and it's been something that a lot of people, I think far more people than I could possibly name if I had to put them in a credits list, have had an influence on. So yeah.
That's great to hear, because the multiplayer aspect is something that people absolutely love, that I've seen myself.
Yeah.
Like, people really seem taken with the multiplayer aspect of the game.
Well, this is the thing, it's something that works well at events, but it's the bit that people are saying to me now, they'd buy it for that. The single player, they haven't even touched yet, but they'd buy it for the multiplayer. So it's great to get that sort of feedback when people come up to you and they want it as it is. And it's like, well, there's tons more to it, and they haven't even touched that stuff yet. But yeah, so...
Yeah, just to draw on a little point you made earlier, what's the game that took 2 years away from On and Off Again? What's the game that we could have had today that might have stolen the show from On and Off Again that you threw away?
I was making a lovely little sort of Micro Machine-esque racer for iOS. It played really well. The art was letting it down, if I'm honest. And I worked with, well, I tried to work with 3 separate artists on the game. And just through problems sharing time, because it was a hobby, problems getting time with an artist and myself and making this game, it didn't really work. The collaboration on it didn't really work, as it has on other projects, unfortunately. And that one, it just struggled. And I kind of fell out of love with the project after about 6 months of making changes to try and fit the artwork in. I kind of lost what I was enjoying with it. So it fell by the wayside. It might be something I go back to after Off and On Again's finished. It was a game that, I mean, again, some of the people that I've met at events with Off and On Again now, I've gone back and they've gone, we met before, and then we've been talking, they've gone, you had a racing game, and it's nice that that's remembered. It's nice that it's stuck in their mind. But yeah, it might be something that I revisit. The code's still there. It still plays quite nicely. It's just something that I just got bored with because it wasn't working the way I wanted it to, unfortunately.
You never know, you might resurrect it one day, and as I say, you're more than welcome once On and Off again is laid to rest. You could always bring it MGU and see what people think. And if you
Use that. Yeah, I think it need updating. This is the major change I made when I moved to Off and On again from this was moving to Unity. I wasn't using Unity before then. I was coding a lot of stuff. So mobile stuff, I did a mobile game for Android, and it was in Java and OpenGL. My tech demo stuff on PC used to be C++ and OpenGL. So moving to Unity was a big step with Off and On again. And again, it came down to limited time. Unity helps massively with that. So it might be something that I take the original design for and some of the assets from the original game and try knocking a version up in Unity. Might even do it on a game jam and just explore the idea again. Because Micro Machines is one of those games, well, Micro Machines 2 to be specific, one of those games that I loved as a child. And it was something I wanted to play with. In saying that, there's modern versions of Micro Machines and similar games that have come out since that kind of probably steal the thunder from that. So might be hard to actually do something that competes with them.
As a game developer, how do you just to draw upon this point? As you know, we use Unreal Engine.
Mm-hmm.
How do you like Unity then so far? With you developing your first ever game in it, how's the experience with the Unity engine been for you?
I found it hard initially to give up some control over certain things. I was used to writing my own physics and writing my own sound controls and things like that, and running the game itself. I had full control. I knew where everything was, and giving up some of that control to Unity, it allowed me to do things a lot quicker, but led to certain parts where I wasn't sure why it was doing things, and it took me a while to work out why and work out workarounds for those things if I didn't like them. But it was the engine of choice at the time. You go back 2 years, and very few people were picking up Unreal. And I know from speaking to yourself and a lot of other students, Unreal is very much the engine people are now using coming out of university. I keep getting approached by people going, do you have any Unreal experience? We'd like you on this project. No, not touched it. From what I'm told, just from my programming background, I'm told I'd probably get on quite well with Unreal. If I find myself with spare time ever, I might approach Unreal for my next project. Just as I enjoy learning stuff, so if it comes down to me making a new project in Unreal or Unity, and I have enough time, I might just make it Unreal for the sake of it.
I think we should get you an MG game jam, stick you in Unreal and see how you take to it. That could be.
Yeah.
We could get it on film and just be like, right, a wild Tim Keenan.
See me frustrated.
Yeah, see what he's like in Unreal for the first time. Get actual footage of it. This is what he's like in Unreal. Let's see how he takes to it.
Yeah. No. That could be embarrassing. No, I mean, I actually considered it for Jamchester this year. I considered just setting myself up with Unreal because there's no pressure on at something like that, especially if I was working on my own, so it was a case of, well, if I don't make anything, I've got 48 hours to experiment with stuff. So I did consider Unreal then, and was talked out of it. Someone said to me, you don't want to be learning an engine from scratch on the game jam, but the way the game went, it wouldn't have been a bad thing, I think, if I come out of there with Unreal knowledge. But yeah, it would be a distraction at the moment. I need to crack on with Unity and finishing this game. Whether or not, I mean, it might be down to whoever I collaborate with next. I have another game in mind that I've spoken to a few people about, and if I take a developer on that who happens to have Unreal experience, then I might pick Unreal and then just run with that. So we'll see.
So just for our audiences, could you actually tell people what Jamchester is and what your experience like was as an indie developer there?
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Jamchester 2 years now. It started last year. So they've done 2 jams. It's labelled as the largest professional game jam in the UK, in that they do have tickets for hobbyists and indies and a couple of students, but the majority of the tickets are aimed at studios. So they had Codemasters come this year, for example, and win 2 of the awards, which was massive for them. They made a big thing out of it afterwards. But it's really well run. It's kind of a joint venture between Gameopolis in Manchester, which is a community group run by Simon Smith, and Hack Manchester, who run hackathons in Manchester, but run all sort of the logistical side of Manchester. So while Simon pushes all the game angle on it, I think it's Hack. I'm trying to remember how they actually labelled themselves. They rebranded recently, but Hack Manchester run the actual sort of day-to-day running of it, the actual venue, the food, the volunteers who go around sorting everything out. And it's a really well-run event. We were well fed, well entertained. There's a great bunch of people in there. It's a really relaxed atmosphere, considering it's competitive. People don't act like they're being competitive in there. There's a lot of sharing, a lot of good fun. Some games on show as well, so there's a place to go and play. And it's positioned in the Northern Quarter in Manchester, so it's easy enough to walk out and go and explore Manchester if you want to. Not that there was time. But yeah, it was good fun. You get people in there. It's maximum team of 4. Some people in there on their own, like myself. Some people in professional teams. Some really weird tech on show. People brought in all sorts of stuff. There was a massive VR dome thing in our room that a company had brought and set up, which was awesome to watch. And yeah, it was just a really good weekend. And hopefully I'll get time to do it again next year.
Hopefully I might be able to join you this year as well. I'd say I wasn't able to come with you all this year, but I might be able to join in on the fun.
If you can make the time, it's great fun.
So yeah, we'll move on to the next question now. So what aspects of game design as a whole do you love? So what aspects of on and off's development process have been the most enjoyable and of course frustrating for you during its development, and how has it kind of affected your experience within the games industry?
In terms of frustrating and joy, multiplayer is both joyous in that the reaction I get from players is great, and immensely frustrating because all I can really do is plug 4 controllers in and use 2 hands to try and make players run around. I need a team to test it, but it's also, I mean, it brings its own set of troubles, multiplayer, especially if you've not designed it in the game initially. I was quite lucky when I started looking at how to hack my multiplayer into my code. I realised that, I'd actually quite cleverly thought this ahead, and everything actually worked quite nicely. But I think if you're bringing something in, there were still problems. If you're bringing something in on the side, you're trying to get multiplayer in later on in the game, that's quite hard, and that probably is a good learning curve for me. Next time, I will have to think through whether or not I'm going to have a multiplayer angle before I start the project. Again, it would be hard to put network play in now, whereas if I'd done it from the beginning, that would be a lot simpler. So as much as the iterative design has been useful to me to actually get this game going, it has presented its own problems. I'm not a game designer, make this clear. I'm not a designer. I meet a lot of talented creatives going around these events. And I do stress the fact that I'm a programmer, and I find design quite hard, both from a game design point of view and a level design point of view. I think I'm just about getting away with the game design bit, struggling with perhaps more the structured stuff in terms of level design, which multiplayer doesn't really need that much. The arenas I've created are quite small, and the gameplay comes from the way the players approach the game. The single player stuff is heavily driven by the design though, and that's the bit that I struggle more with.
So even though you've been pretty much creating this game from scratch yourself and obviously aiming to have it released, you still kind of don't consider yourself a game designer. Do you still consider yourself more of a programmer?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not an artist, I'm not a designer, I am a programmer, and yet everything in the project is mine. I would say that that's where my strength lies, and it's more because I see other people. I know what other people are capable of, and I think working on a project by yourself is hard, but you have to know where your limits are on certain things and approach those things carefully. So art is something that, well, you've seen my game. I say minimalist because I'm a programmer who can't draw. But that's it's a good approach. If you can't draw, then pick a style, stick with it, go with something that's consistent. And I've tried my best to go with that. From a design point of view, I've acknowledged where my flaws are, and I've sought people who are better at that than me. Yourself, you're in a good position. You're coming out of university in groups of people now who are multidisciplined, and you're making teams where you're able to play to each other's strengths. As I say, that wasn't really the way. I mean, when I finished my software engineering degree, a lot of people were aiming at big consultancies. They were going off to the likes of Accenture and Capita, Logica, where I ended up, BAE, and places like that. This I could form a group of people out of my course that would all have skills that would lend themselves to making a game would be impossible. We didn't have artists; we just had programmers. It was just the way my course was structured. So we came out, and I hit, as I say, individually went off to try and find jobs. Nowadays, I think certainly from games courses, you're better placed. You know this better because you've been in groups of people that have different skill sets. You're better placed to identify what you're good at and what they're good at, and team up and make use of that.
So does the idea of maybe not forming a team of multidisciplined people after On and Off Again appeal to you?
Maybe, yeah. But I'm in a harder position. I have 2 children and a third on the way. I have a day job. I have responsibilities to those things. Forming a team requires you to have responsibility for that team. I think after Off and On Again, I may have the ability to do that. There's certain amounts of time that'd be freed up for that. I've met a lot of people along the way that I'd be quite happy to work with. And I think I know a lot more now than I did when I started this in terms of the actual business side of this. I could probably structure it a lot better than I did when I started Off and On Again. If I started Off and On Again with the knowledge I had at the time and tried it with a team, it would have fallen apart badly. I'll be completely honest. Because people would have left, people would have had time for each other. It would have had to have been a funded game in order to keep people together, and at the time I wouldn't have had a clue how to go about doing that. So after this, I may attempt something slightly more ambitious, which I have in mind, and I have spoken to people. But we'll see. This needs to be finished first. Keep an eye on the target, as it were.
Just to draw on that little point, what you said there about the business aspect of it. As you know, we've just set up our own company. We're a couple of months old, and we're still learning the business side of it. Could you maybe go into a bit of depth about the business side of development that maybe some of our gamer audiences don't actually know about that would be interesting for you? Like, what kind of business elements are there to actually being an indie developer that you've got to consider when making a game?
Being able to eat. If I'm completely honest. No, there's a serious element. I know a lot of people who have set up their businesses and struggled in terms of funding, and not necessarily thought through how they're going to pay the bills. Some of them have survived, some of them have quit and had to go and get a job, and their projects have fallen by the wayside or have been put to rest for now and will hopefully come back again. A lot of people struggle and a lot of people don't realise it. I've got a good friend who has worked really, really, really hard on a game for years, and has obtained funding within the last year for it. And it's amazing the amount of effort he's put into it. He deserves the position he's now in to take that game forward. He's put his heart and soul into it. People don't necessarily realise that. The amount of people who seem to think, oh, well, you're an indie developer, but, you're still paying your rent and you're still eating. And well, the people who are doing that, less funded, are doing it from another job. So it's not a case of, well, they're making a game and they're somehow paying the bills. It's, well, they're making a game and they're working 9 to 5 or more. And they're working themselves to the bone to get their game done. And mostly through the passion they've got going forward. Now, don't get me wrong, there's people out there making a living out of this who are making their game based upon the money they've had in the last game. There's plenty of people out there doing that. it's just it's a hard business to be in though. I don't think a lot of gamers necessarily appreciate that. Not saying they all, don't all, but I'm just saying some comments you get, people do assume you've got money coming in from the games.
Yeah, that's just kind of a nice, fresh perspective to get from an indie developer, because obviously a lot of people don't understand the indie side of things. Like the financial structure of indie development is different to AAA, can absolutely completely different.
Yeah, you've got to be realistic and not bet the house on a massive success. I think you've got to be realistic about the sort of success you can get as a small studio or as an individual. If you know your niche market or you know your target audience and you know you can get certain figures for a certain price, great. But you do get a lot, well, not so much now, but you did get a lot when mobile started for people who thought they had the next Angry Birds and they would throw their lives into it, and would come out the other end wondering what happened. And I think a lot people are more realistic now. I think people are wiser to that now, and are more careful about how much they throw at something or how much research they do into what sort of market they're selling to first.
So we'll move on to our next question. There's only a couple more after this one. So bit of a trip down memory lane for you. So what have been your most memorable moments during your time within the industry and on and off against development that you can recall? You've been actively in the industry, haven't you, since about 2013? Is it around that time? Kind of about when you started.
Yeah, I mean, Ginger Biscuit Games has been around since then. I was around the industry a lot more, just from a social point of view, and making stuff on the side, from much earlier. One of the best memories is one I recalled, as I say, I developed earlier this year when someone asked me about when I got started, and I went to develop in 2007. And nowadays it's a much different event. You go to it and there's indies everywhere. There's indie talks. There's events afterwards, with games on show, and it's a very big social event. And when I went in 2007, it was a very much a AAA industry event. Everyone there knew each other. They were catching up with old mates they'd worked at. People weren't there really to meet new people unless it was through people they already knew. So it was a very hard event to go into not knowing anyone. And I was very lucky that on the night of the Developer Awards, I was in the bar, which was sponsored by Sony. And it was a good night in there. And the Developer Awards started and everyone left apart from a few people. And we were the ones who clearly couldn't afford the ticket. And but my dad was there staying in a hostel. It was like I was doing this on the cheap. It was very much I wasn't there on expenses. And I met a guy from Portugal, Ricardo, and he has been a massive inspiration since. He was a great guy who took the time to talk to me that night. He was making mobile games in Java because this was before the iPhone, and he had a very clear idea of how to make his games, and how to make enough money to make the next one. And he's still making games today. He's someone who has been in the industry a long time, and as I say, has made big titles for mobile, a lot of licensed things which allowed to keep his business going. And he was working with a small indie team last year at EGX, showing their game Striker's Edge. And he's at Gamescom at the moment showing that game. He's someone who got me back into making games years later. So when you say 2013, this is how I really came back to it. He came to London for the Mobile Games Forum. I went for a beer with him, and I met people from London Indies. That got me making games again. They were the people that were saying to me, "Why aren't you making anything?" And they were right. There was no excuse for it. I bought an Android tablet within sort of about 2 weeks and was making a scrolling shooter just as something to play around with, and that got me back into making small projects and then on to making larger games.
So that's the story of how Ginger Biscuit Games was kind of born then.
Pretty much, yeah. That and my love of biscuits.
For our audiences, obviously I know where it comes from, but would you care to explain why you're called the Ginger Biscuit Man and why it's Ginger Biscuit Games?
there's a couple of stories behind this. Partly, I am ginger, and grew up that way. But I bake biscuits and I bring biscuits. Again, it was the introvert thing from earlier. I used to take biscuits to events as a way of starting conversation. If you take biscuits, people come to you. That was my way of doing it. Now I think I do it just because there's a level of expectation that I have to bring biscuits. But no, it's a great thing. People have remembered me for giving them a biscuit, more so than the games at times. I was at Develop last year, I think, and some bloke walked up to me and just shouted, "Biscuit dude," and gave me a hug. I don't know if he knew what my name was, but he remembered I'd given him a biscuit. And again, MGU, I took biscuits there and I have branded stamps, so I stamped my biscuit, thanks to David Haven. And I noticed a load of the pictures afterwards are people with biscuits in hand, holding the biscuit up, and there's my Ginger Biscuit logo in shot. So again, Develop on Twitter, a number of people posted pictures up of the branded biscuit, and it's like, well, there's my logo out and around. People are getting to eat delicious sugary treats, and I'm getting my logo in front of people. Why not?
I can vouch for these biscuits, by the way, people. They are good. So anyone who's coming MGU on the 4th, I don't know if I might make it a regular administration fee now.
Have to bring biscuits.
Yeah, you have to bring biscuits to show on and off again, because it's just an excuse for me to eat the delicious ginger biscuits.
In fairness, it's rare that I don't have them. It's one of those things, as long as I have time before an event, I will have biscuits. So yeah, people should seek me out at events that I'm at if they're hungry.
We've kind of like set off a thing for our studio, because we've been kind of copying the trend now. We've seen how you've kind of got that little biscuit thing. So for us, it's like, right, we've got the leaflets at the moment, but we're contemplating a few ideas. We're thinking patches. We might try heart patches.
Yeah.
Give everyone a patch away at the thing. We've got a couple of ideas we're working with, but you've kind of started off a little bit of a trend now with some of the indies.
This is the thing. I sort of stumbled onto a marketing technique without really meaning it. The only reason I started stamping them, I'll be honest, there was a guy, Alan Zacconi, who's actually releasing a game called Still Time next week on PlayStation and PS Vita. There's my little plug for him. Unintentional. But he's been making this game for about 5 years. He's a great guy, he's heavily involved in London Indies. And I met him again at Develop, wonderful event that it is, because I keep bringing it up, years ago, because someone said, "You two need to meet." We didn't know why. And then we met, and we both had biscuits in hand. Now, his were shop bought. I'll stress this, mine were homemade. Yes, Alan, if you hear this ever, there you go, there's my difference. However, Alan makes better games, so people always think of him as the biscuit guy. When I first came to Manchester, I tried to give someone a biscuit. They went, "Is this an Alan Zacconi thing?" So I have to better it slightly by having the stamp. And the stamp has become the thing that made them a bit different, and made them slightly more memorable. And people are now starting to remember me as the biscuit guy instead. I didn't mean to take that away from Alan too much, but, you know, I had to try it. As I say, his games are better, so my biscuits have to be better. That's the way it is.
I'd say it's definitely working. The photographer that I hired for MGU on the night, she loved your biscuits. All these professional photographs of just ginger biscuit games.
Nice.
I couldn't put them all in the album because there was that many of them just eating biscuits.
Feel free to send them to me. I need those pictures.
Yeah, pass them on.
There's a cracking picture. There's just a candid picture of people playing the game, and one of the people in the foreground has the biscuit held up, and the logo's just on show whilst they're playing the game. And I was like, completely unintentional shot. It's brilliant.
We're actually having an MGU film made very, very soon. So I might, if you're at this next event, so we'll see if we can ask the film guy to try and like get someone eating a ginger biscuit with the logo at a certain angle, just a shameless plug-in.
Who was that with? Was it FutureWorks did the video on the night of just wandering around? And
that's Wes at FutureWorks. Fantastic bloke. He turns up whenever he can, doing live videos.
There was a young lady he was talking to, and she just had one of. He goes, "Oh, you've got a cookie," and then she held it up, and he went, "Oh no, I can't see it. We need to find light."
That's the
photographer. So they could get the logo on shot. I was like, "Yeah, brilliant."
Yeah, that was the photographer who was taking all the pictures. Right. That was Lauren. That was Lauren Georgia of Wider Focus Productions. So yeah, she was loving your biscuits on the night. I think Kat Brown was stealing a bit of your thunder with her white chocolate chip brownies. I noticed there was a bit of a war going on there. It was either
competition. I was unaware of the competition.
Yeah, we had MGUs as well, but
I have to say, there is no competition. The thing with Alan, we joke, but at the end of the day, more biscuits, I don't care. Bring more biscuits. Everyone bring biscuits, and everyone will be fat and happy and full of sugar.
Yeah. I love the biscuits. Anyone who's coming MGU on the 4th, you got to try the biscuits.
Cool. And now I've got pressure to bake, but yeah.
Good. That's what I'm trying to aim for. Right. So bit of another question for you. So, what are kind of your long-term plans for On and Off Again? I know you said previously you're aiming to have it released by December. So, what's kind of your plan for the future of it and for Ginger Biscuit Games?
I'll clarify, finished by December, released next year. So the plans for it to be feature complete by December. It may not have the integration stuff done for console and Steam by then, which is why I'm saying sort of early next year for PC and then later in the year for Xbox. The plan is to see how it goes. The original aim for Off and On Again, well, I'll go back. The original aim for my first mobile game was one download that wasn't my mum. That was my set goal. I've since upped my game. I am now aiming for one purchase that isn't my mum. That's the entire plan for Off and On Again. So basically, anyone I don't know spending money they have earned on my game, I see as a massive compliment. So if I can get that, I'm happy. If it sells better than that, brilliant. Obviously, I will try my best to push it to sell more than that. Any money that makes will go back into the company. It's not money I need to make in order to pay for my house or pay for food. I have a job that pays for that. So any money that I make from Off and On Again will go back into being seed money for funding for the next project. And that will aim at trying to improve what I can do with the next project over this. So that's the stated goal for the company in that sense. The idea is to grow and make something more ambitious if I make money from Off and On Again. Even if I don't make money from Off and On Again, I am still going to try and make something more ambitious. I might just go about trying to get funding for it instead. This has all been self-funded this time, and it's all, as I say, done in scraps of time. I think next time I'll want to bring some people on board, and I think you can only really do that by having funds available to do it. I don't think it's fair to ask people to give their time to the project without having something to keep them going and help them pay their bills. So that's the plan.
So you said you said you were aiming for Microsoft Xbox, correct? How did that come about then? So I imagine you've had to jump through a few holes to get it on Xbox. There is a process to apply to ID Xbox, and I was pushed by a couple of people. One in particular, Simon Jackson, who's actually an MVP for Microsoft and Xbox. He works outside of the industry, but does a lot of work in terms of training materials. He's written a book, and he does videos online and does talks, for example. So he did the Unity user group in Manchester recently. I'm not sure if you were there for that. He did a talk about how to ship a game for the Universal Windows platform. So to use UWP on Xbox and Windows. And he used Off and On Again as the example for that. I gave him the code for it, and he showed the code running natively and as a UWP application. So he does a lot of that sort of stuff. So he got involved. Basically, he came to a playtester session and went, "Why is this not coming to Xbox?" And I went, "I don't even know how to do it." So he gave me a kick in the right direction, pointed out that it wasn't that hard to find the right direction, and perhaps I should have already looked. And then I filled in the forms and went ahead with the process. You do have to do a lot of work for it. You do have to do your submission properly. You do have to do a lot of paperwork. And I was very happy when they said yes, and I got accepted onto ID Xbox. They supplied me with hardware. They've supplied me with updates for it and help. And there's more help available if I go and seek it. But at the moment, I haven't needed it because I'm working on a very generic game in terms of the platform. I've not done any of the integration work for Xbox yet. What I've done is worked on a Unity-based game that will work on the Xbox and on Windows. I've run it up on the Xbox, it runs fine on there, but I haven't done anything in the way of achievements or player sign-ins and things like that. So that work needs to come later. But yeah, for anyone who's considering applying to make a game for console, apply.
yes, it's hard, and yes, you have to have a game ready, and you have to have all the right materials for it. But the process is open. There's a website, there's the form, go fill it in. They can only say no. It's the worst thing that can happen is they say no, and you go back and try again later. But if they say yes, then it's massive boost in confidence and a massive sort of push for your game that you can get it onto a console. I will be looking at other platforms, but there's costs involved, and again, it's self-funded, so it depends probably how the PC launch goes as to whether or not I look at other platforms. So we'll see. But yeah.
So is this for the Xbox One as well, or is this for the
Xbox One, Windows 10, and Steam at the moment is the plan.
So how does that change your deadlines at all for the project? Do you have to have like a certain deadline hit for Microsoft to be able to have it launched on the Xbox One?
You have to give them an estimate initially, and my estimate is currently January, so I'm going to probably have words with them, because I don't think I won't have the integration stuff done unless I partner with someone soon to do it. So you have to give them a date, and you have to make them aware if that changes. But they work with you on that. You do get regular updates, and if you are getting close to when you said you're going to deliver, you get an email asking you how you're getting on. Is this likely? If so, can you fill in the following details? And they are very supportive. So I wouldn't be too worried if you have a deadline in mind and you think, oh, if I commit to this, I'm going to have it done by then. That's not the case. So yeah, it's not fixed in stone. You're not signing a contract. They're not funding you. If they were funding you, that's different. If they were funding your game and they set you a deadline, then your deadline needs to hit in order to get you money. This is very much independent developers shipping games, self-published games to Xbox, and therefore there's a lot more freedom to that.
Fair enough. So we'll move on to the next question. There's only two more after this. There's two more questions left now. So, as an indie developer, what advice would you give to those looking to break into the games industry and those beginning their journey into games design and development?
Things have changed since I started. Collaboration appears to be key. Certainly right now. The time for working on your own is possibly past for a lot of people. Some people can still get away with it. Some people can still work on their own, pump out great projects, brilliant. However, I hate to use the word compete. We're not really competing with each other, but in order to stay at a level in comparison to the other games that are coming out, or stay viable, I think knowing where your weaknesses are and collaborating with people that cover those weaknesses and that you cover theirs, I think really matters now. If you want to make a project that looks as good as the other projects coming out, especially, teams like yours, as I say, you're coming out of uni, you've got far more time than people like myself to do these things. You've got far more talent, quite frankly, in key areas than someone like myself has. But you said it in your game jam. Yeah, you said it to me earlier. Your game, has gameplay, but looks a bit rubbish. The other guy's game looks great, but not much gameplay there. That happened a lot at Jamchester. What you need is to make sure you collaborate with people where one person's putting the decent gameplay in and one person's making it look pretty. It's the easiest thing to work out whilst you're young and whilst you've got time, is work out who you're good working with, and form that team and make your games that way.
Fair advice. Sounds really good. Yeah, it sounds like that's kind of the route we've gone with Try Hard Interactive Collaboration, kind of like a mixed bag of specialities and different personalities and different enthusiasms.
Yeah.
To get like a really, really broad range, so we're not limited to just one speciality. Hence why we do the open community stuff. We're trying to be different and branch out. So obviously, as you know, production is kind of, and networking is kind of my vibe. So obviously that's kind of like a different aspect. We've kind of built a team based around different specialities whilst we're still young in this industry.
Yeah, I will say, can I just briefly add, because I should have said this first, I have to say, getting to events and networking is the wrong word. When I started at a consultancy as a graduate, the first slide they had networking. And whilst the word is wrong, the theme wasn't. Getting out there, meeting people, meeting lots of people, becoming known and making sure you know who key players are. That sounds terrible because it's business, but it's not hard. You're just making friends.
Yeah,
That's all it is. You just
how I
want
see it.
to make mates. I go to develop, and yes, I can walk around and it could be seen as business because, oh, I'm meeting up with that person and that person, or and I'm talking business. No, I'm just catching up with mates.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I love going to those events now. That's huge. And it's hard to do for people on their own, and it's hard to do for people certainly from a programming background. We tend to be an introverted bunch. But even if you are, get out there. You have to get out there and meet people. Find a way doing it. Take biscuits, do whatever. You need to find a way to meet people.
As I fully agree with what you said. As you know, I set up an organisation with my good friend Steph, and we did it as a case of we created something that doesn't exist in Manchester, which was kind of game devs and game developers meeting. And over time, I consider a lot of people that turn up now friends, like yourself.
Yeah.
Like you and I have hung out outside of game dev.
Indeed.
We've hung out, we've had food together. You've seen me drunk off my skull before. You've seen. Yeah, as I say, these are people. When I met you, I was intimidated at first at Indie Drinks because you were just this game developer and I was just a fresh first year student.
This is the crazy thing. People get intimidated because they see someone who people know, and you go, no, really, there's nothing to be intimidated by. I remember I talked about the mobile game forum earlier where I went to meet up with Ricardo. And I got there and I looked in and I couldn't see him. So I spent a good half an hour out on my phone talking to my mate on the phone, just wasting time so I could be sure he would turn up so I would go in there and not be on my own. And I look back at that and go, God, I'm embarrassed by the fact that I wouldn't just go in and be in there. Even if you're not with someone, be in there until you can get a conversation going. Now, I get the fact that it's hard. I do, because obviously I found it hard. But it's necessary. It's necessary because it's not just about knowing people. It's necessary because it will drive you forward. It will drive you to make your game. Someone asked me off and on again, one of the key driving factors for it. I said, I was in and around these people and I was making games, but if you're not making something worthwhile and you're not taking it seriously, you do kind of start to feel like a bit of an imposter. I was running nights and the games I was making weren't finished, and they weren't close to being polished in any way or playable. And it's like, no, I need to actually make something that I'm proud of. It drove me, and I was inspired by the people around me and what they were making, to make something of their level, to make something that they would want to play and that I would want to play. So it is huge. Getting out there and being sociable matters, really does matter.
I could not absolutely agree more. The same with me. It was a case of the first year I was nervous, I was dead scared of embracing these people, but then I just went for it. I started going to Indie Drinks and went to a few things. I woke up one morning, DM'd my friend Steph on Twitter and said, do you want to do a gamers night? We did it as a one-off. It went really well, and that was how MGU was born. Just through networking, and it's how it happens. It takes time networking, doesn't it? It does.
And again, if you're worried about going out and meeting people on your own, take your mates. Exactly. Because you've got mates who are interested in games. Take them. Go to an event where games are being played. Again, even if you go to, the pub night that you came to, and it's different from MGU, but people still show their stuff. They still take their laptops out and show their games. And the easiest thing to get to know someone is play what they're making. Don't try and show them what you're making necessarily the first time. Play what other people are making. Take an interest in what they're doing. That'll get the conversation going. And then they'll say, oh, so what are you doing? What are you working on? And then you can show stuff. Or if you're too worried about showing it, then you're embarrassed about showing it in some way. Because again, I've been there. Just talk about what you're doing. Explain what you're trying to do. You don't necessarily have to show it if you're worried. But again, early pub nights in London, I took a scrolling shooter on a tablet in, and I showed it to this guy, Rudolph, and great guy now that I know him, but at the time didn't know who he was. And I showed him a game, and he was very polite about it, and he gave me some good feedback. And I asked him, so what are you working on? And he said, oh, have you played a game called Euphoria? And I was like, yes, it's on my phone. It's done about 4.5 million downloads. I'm embarrassed by my little scrolling shooter. And then I realized I didn't need to be, because he'd played it and he'd enjoyed it and he'd given me feedback. And he's a really nice guy. But it was one of those things, if I'd known who he was, I'd have probably been too scared to show him my game. And I would have missed out on that. We're a friendly bunch on the whole, even if we're a bit introverted. The vast majority of us are a friendly bunch. You need to go out. You need to meet people. You need to be sociable. It's if you don't know who to speak to, find out who's running the event. Go to them. They'll introduce you to people.
I do the same thing at MG. People want to meet someone. I just go, oh, there's Tim Keenan from Ginger Biscuit Games. Do you want to go speak to him? Say hello. Come on. We'll just go say hello to him. And we're all a friendly bunch in this industry. You know, we're not.
Yeah.
We kind of have that unwritten rule, don't we? Of don't be an arse. Like, you know, don't be an arse to one another. It's the unwritten rule of the games industry. We all get along with one another.
It's supposed to be the unwritten rule of life, but some people ignore it. But yeah, as an industry, we're a friendly bunch. We make things that are fun. At the end of the day, we make stuff that people want to play. So you know, we're not going to be scary people, hopefully.
It seems that way definitely when you first entered the network. I was terrified, but then I just thought, you know, I've got to go for it. End of the day, if I don't try, you don't ever know. The worst they can say is we don't like your game. Then you just take that away and go, all right, well, I'll make a better game.
You'll find it very hard pushed for someone to say I don't like your game. People are polite. Sometimes it's polite.
I've never had that ever. We've never had that when we've showcased our game off. Even the gamers have never come out with that sort of stuff.
At some point, you want someone to tell you it's rubbish. You want someone to give you feedback that's negative. You'll find that very hard to find amongst developers. You get that when you take it to gamers. But developers are a very friendly, polite bunch. Even if you're working on something that's not very good yet, they'll be constructive about it and they'll help you make it better. They won't just go, that's rubbish, go away. I've never ever heard anyone say that sort of thing.
I've never had that myself either.
Quite frankly, if you're trying to make something, then you'll be welcome. It doesn't even matter if you're failing to make something. As long as you're trying, then your heart's in the right place and people will take that on board.
So yeah, that's it really. Networking is a powerful thing in this industry.
Yeah.
They say most of your jobs come from networking in this industry, don't they? Like, if you just know someone who knows someone who knows somebody, like, the best way to try and get a job in this industry is to know someone.
It's not just jobs. I mean, whilst I can give examples of, I'm not going to because they're possibly not supposed to talk, but I can give examples of publishing deals being done by mates of a mate knowing someone who showed someone a game, and that publisher then goes, oh, I'd fancy seeing that. I know people who have got jobs within developers through coming to pub nights in Manchester. They weren't involved with that developer in any way, shape or form. They've come via someone else. They've been introduced. Months down the line, they've gone, well, are you interested in working on that? I've been approached, as I said earlier, people come to me asking me, have I got Unreal experience? And I haven't. But these people come to me because they know me and they know I'm sociable. They know who I am. They know whether they'd like to work with me. So I get the offers before they've even checked my technical skills. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to work in games and you're staying in your bedroom, it's not going to work. You have to get out and speak to people.
I'd say even if it's through social media, even if you're someone who's technically not really got much around them in terms of events, like you might live somewhere that's not got much going on, obviously, and travel can be a bit difficult. Social media, networking, that is a powerful tool.
If you're working in a place where not much is going on, start something. I had that from someone who said, oh, you're really lucky you live in London and there's loads of pub nights and we don't have that where I am. And I went, well, go to a pub and start telling people. Even if you have to sit there for a few months, you go, you say first Monday of the month and you say this pub. And even if you turn up and it's just you with a laptop working on your game, well, you'd be working on your game at home anyway. If after a few months a couple of people start turning up, that group will grow. Even if you only meet 4, 5, 6 people come into that group and you regularly start drinking there, after a year that group will grow. There's no reason to say there's nothing going on where I am and I can't get something. I've been to many places where now there are groups. You go to Manchester or Oxford or Brighton or Guildford or Bristol or Birmingham or anywhere. I meet people from groups that have pub nights in Wales and so on that they know people from those nights. When you meet them at bigger events, they know people around because they have pub nights in their town. There's the reason to ever say there's nothing going on where I am.
Absolutely, as you say, with MGU, there was nothing like it before it came
Yeah.
along. There was nothing. There wasn't an event that merged the two worlds together of the game dev and the gamer, and it just started off like that. It was a very, very successful first night. We had about 50 to 60 people turn up, and that number's just continued to grow. And we've built a community. I recognise about half the people that turn up at MGU now, and more people turn up, and that family's just continuing to grow. And we're getting more and more. But as you saw at the last event, there was at least nearly 70 to 90 or something like that at one point. I'm sure it was. I was counting. So yeah, as I say, it just continues to grow. And we just took a bar that had no game events that ever happen. And a dive bar is not usually the type of place to have that.
No.
But now it's become a hub for game networking and gaming.
Just gonna have to balance your nights with the football when the football starts. Football's back on.
Don't you start. I'm still salty over the quizzes.
I point this out because it was one of the problems I had in Clapham in finding pubs. Finding a good pub to run a pub night where there wasn't football on. As a football supporter, it's hard when a game is on and you're in a pub where it's not. But people don't want a loud game going on. So yeah, it's as it was. It worked last time because you had it on and the Man U Real Madrid game was on, and it was fine. I managed to keep an eye on the game and the score whilst showing my game off to people, so it worked quite well. But yeah, it'd be an interesting crowd when the Champions League games start.
Oh, we've noticed that few people tend to leave the football matches now and come in like this.
Yeah, come and play.
They keep looking around.
They've got something to do when their team's losing.
Yeah, they just keep looking around and going like, I'm really tempted to go past that barrier now and just like play the video games instead.
This is the thing. It's not a closed event, which is nice. People do wander in that wouldn't normally be there. And we had this again in Clapham. We went in one night, we set up all our games on one side of the bar, and it was open. There was people in there just after work, and you got them wandering across, kind of going, "Can I play?" You're like, "Yeah, no, that's the point. Come and play our games." Yeah, it's not just the developers. And again, MGU, you've got a good range, and I don't know how many of them are people that have come from MGU, and how many people who just happen to be in the bar and go play on that. But yeah, I am. This is the thing. We got the indie drinks crossover last month because they fell on the same night. I'm trying my best to see how many of them come back when it's not a crossover night. I hope some of them come. I think a fair few of them enjoyed it. I've invited some different groups this time. We'll see how they get on. I've invited people who aren't necessarily devs or gamers as such. They might be interested in playing a few games. But I'm trying to expand the group. Try my best to pull people in from all over the place.
And that's what MG is about. We're a big family, open to all. It's what my number one rule is. All are welcome. Just don't be an ass.
Yeah.
That's the one rule. Turn up, have a good time, cheap food and drink, play some video games, have fun, talk to game devs. Just be nice. Everyone's welcome.
Cheap food and drink helps.
The 50% off food and drinks. That's totally not a plug-in, by the way.
Yeah, but a dive bar do you well there, but it's good food as well. But this is the thing. There's actually a group of people I know who are looking for a reason to meet up for a night in Manchester. As it is, they know myself and Jonathan Port, and Jonathan Port's game Hyper Sentinel is going to be on show at the next MGU. So I've pointed this out to them that even if they just come for the cheap food and drink, it'll be a good place to meet and catch up whilst two of us have our game on show. So that might happen, and they're people that normally wouldn't come to this sort of event. But they might get an interest and they might come to the next one. You never know. So cheap food and drink helps too. You've got a lot going for it in Dive Bar. It works really well there.
Yeah, we're very, very happy with the setup. We're trying to push for more space in the bar now, see if we can take over the other half.
Yeah, again, if you don't conflict with football, I reckon you'll get away with that. So, I'm guessing they make a reasonable amount from football as well. So if you pick nights like a Monday night and do that, you'll probably be able to get away with a lot more space.
So yeah, final question of the podcast, and it's a bit of a mouthful. This one we'll end on a bit of a big one. So, and finally, speaking from your own experience in the game industry and on and off again's development cycle, what would you see are the key essentials someone will need to have in order to learn to become successful within the games industry?
Patience. No, I don't know. There's many answers. You have to be realistic. As I said before, funding's hard. So you have to be careful on your goals. You have to keep your game simple if you're working on your own and it's not funded. Don't get carried away with ambition. It's very easy to go, I'm going to make this and it's going to have this, and this, and not be able to deliver any of it. Key essential thing is probably therefore keeping yourself grounded. Knowing what you're good at, sticking to what you're good at, bringing other people in if there's areas you need other things improving. But yeah, see, I've said about 5 things instead of one key thing. There's too many things. All the things, many things you need. And as I say, we'll go back to it. I'm gonna say the key thing is you're gonna need to be surrounded by a community and get out and meet them. You won't drive a game on by yourself. You could have the best idea in the world and you could have the most skills in the world, and the chances of you sitting in your bedroom and making that game by yourself without feedback from others, without getting someone else to drive you forward, without getting that motivation from someone telling you something's good or something's bad, just won't work. You need to have a community around you. You need to get out and meet that community. So find your communities, get out and meet them. If they don't exist, make one.
So yeah, that kind of just ends the podcast really for this week. So yeah, that's kind of it really. So thanks very much, Tim, for coming on.
You're welcome.
It's an absolute pleasure. So to all of you that know, Tim will be displaying on and off again at Manchester Gamers United.
I'm going to keep correcting you. Off and on again. Off and on again.
Oh God. Damn it, yeah.
It's easy enough. If your computer's gone wrong, what do? You turn it off and on again. Not on and off again.
Should I just call it OAOA like I used to? Should I just call it OAOA? Back when
I've let you off because you've been saying it all the way through the podcast, but you'll notice that later.
Oh God, is this just to show me up in front of the viewers now? Just like he's been saying it wrong all along.
I'm just going to correct it at the end so that it remains in people's heads. But yeah, I will be showing it at the MGU on the 4th.
Yep.
If people want to come play.
People are more than welcome to come play at MGU, and myself and my fellow game developers at TryHard will have the latest build of the Ottoman Empire for people to come play, so you can come meet both us and Tim, give us feedback on the games and what you think.
And eat biscuits.
And there's biscuits. That's his administration fee from now on now. He's got to pay with biscuits to show the game off.
We'll plug some of the other games. There's some great games coming.
Yep. So that's kind of it really. So yeah, I'll just say goodbye to Tim now, ladies and gentlemen, but thank you very much for joining this podcast. Thank you very
Thanks
much.
so much for having me.
For anyone who stayed around for the full over hour, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Cheers, bye.